You're just tuning in. Here are the top 5 stories you need to be across tonight. Returning to that breaking news, Sydney's train network is now back up and running, but commuters are still facing long delays. A communication issue sent the network into meltdown around 2:45 this afternoon, creating chaos just before the afternoon rush. Sky News has revealed Reserve Bank Governor Philip Lowe enjoyed an extraordinary mortgage perk on top of his generous salary, which is now more than $1 million a year. Lowe was given a half-price loan by the RBA to buy his 5-bedroom house in Sydney's east. The New South Wales opposition has marked International Women's Day by committing to a 50-50 gendered cabinet if elected during this month's state election. The 50-50 cabinet announcement was among a host of other announcements to support women in New South Wales. Australia Post has suspended deliveries to hundreds of addresses in Alice Springs after one of its mail carriers was allegedly violently assaulted on several occasions. Australia Post has notified residents, saying it will temporarily redirect its deliveries to the local post office. Plus, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has flown to India on a trade mission involving 25 industry leaders. He'll meet India's Prime Minister for the annual Leaders Summit in New Delhi, where the pair are expected to discuss trade, investment, renewable energy and defence and security cooperation. Now, just if you're tuning in, returning to that top story tonight, that exclusive details have been revealed by Sky News that Reserve Bank Governor Philip Lowe has enjoyed a mortgage perk. He was given a half-price loan to buy his 5-bedroom home in Sydney's east in 1997, and this is on top of his generous salary. Let's bring in our panel to discuss this. Sky News business editor Ross Greenwood, welcome to the show, and Labor MP and former economic advisor to Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, Andrew Charlton. Great to have you both with us tonight. Ross, look, a lot of people are doing it really tough at the moment, paying their mortgages. The RBA governor is already being accused of misleading Australians by promising rates weren't going to rise until 2024. We've now seen our 10th consecutive rate rise. We're now finding out that when he first bought his home in Sydney's east, he had mortgages that were half the variable rate at the time. Surely he's got to go now. The point is, he doesn't get it. He's out of touch.
No. Look, I'll criticise the Governor of the Reserve Bank for a range of different things, for that 2024 comment, for the fact that inflation was below target for 8 years before the pandemic came through, for the fact that the Reserve Bank, I think, overstimulated during that time and left a massive black hole in its balance sheet right now, even the way in which it's communicated, and he's communicated personally. And on top of that, even right now, the fact that I believe maybe the Reserve Bank is not going hard enough on inflation when the United States and other nations are. But in this regard, you've got to cut him some slack. It was 1997. It was common practice, not just in the Reserve Bank, but other parts of banking at that time, that these discounted loans were around the place. So, as I say, in this case, I give the poor bugger a bit of reprieve, at least anyway.
Strongly disagree. Poor bugger, he is not. He got a half-price loan compared to the rest of Australians. Andrew Charlton, you're the MP for Parramatta. These are your people who are really having a hard time meeting their mortgage repayments at the moment. Are you critical of Philip Lowe? Do you think he should now resign before his term expires in September?
Well, look, I think a lot of people are going to be interested in this because they are doing it really tough. My first job was at the RBA. I remember there were a few perks around. I think I remember some very cheap breakfast that was subsidised. I put on a few kilograms back then. I definitely didn't get a free loan or a half-price loan. But the point here is that I think Australians want to know that the RBA is a modern institution that is operating in a way that best represents Australians' interests. And that's why the Treasurer has announced a review of the RBA, and that review will be looking at these types of issues. It'll be looking at representation on the board. Are the right people on the board to properly reflect the diversity of views in Australia? It'll be looking at the operations, the governance, the research. Do we have the best approach to monetary policy in Australia? And that's what people want to know. People want to know that when these really difficult decisions are being made, decisions that affect them every day, that make a huge impact on their household budget, are those trade-offs being managed well? Are the impacts being well understood?
Yeah. Now, I'm not an economist like both of you are, but I do know that to get inflation down, you need monetary and fiscal policy working together. Ross Greenwood, do you think the government is doing enough? Are they playing their role? Because, you know, we know the super changes, but they don't kick in until 2025. And at that point, inflation is meant to be back down to between 2 to 3%. So what are they actually doing now, and should they do more?
Well, the government has to certainly cut its own cloth, but the reality is that interest rates work immediately when you raise them. And the reason is because most people are on variable rate mortgages, whereas government, if it's to actually make significant cuts to its budget, it's got to go through the whole political process. That's the reason why you have an independent Reserve Bank. That's the reason why if there is a change in the composition of the board of the Reserve Bank, you need people who are prepared to fight inflation, prepared to take hard decisions and put interest rates up, and simply don't go to water and not stop raising interest rates because it's politically convenient to do so. So this is a really important aspect of this RBA review, and it's also important to recognise that the Reserve Bank has got to have this power to crush inflation, which long term has very detrimental effects on Australia's economy.
Andrew Charlton, Peter Costello yesterday was critical of the RBA for not acting soon enough on inflation. Do you think the RBA was too slow?
Well, it's not up to the government to second guess the RBA. The important thing for the government is to make sure that we make the RBA's job as easy as possible. And as Ross said, that means making sure that fiscal policy and monetary policy are working together. And that's exactly what the government is doing, showing an enormous amount of restraint
Andrew,
in spending.
Just on that, what is the government doing to cut spending? Because the October budget had a net spending growth.
Well, in the October budget, we had revenue gains from high commodity prices and other things, and the government banked 99% of those revenue gains. They put them back into the budget rather than spending them. That is the highest banking of revenue gains than we have had in decades. So it shows a level of restraint that the Australian government hasn't seen for a very long time. And the Treasurer has made it clear that that restraint will go forward into the upcoming budget. The second thing that the government is doing is taking some pressure off inflation by reducing prices, bringing down the cost of medicines, bringing down the cost of childcare, creating fee-free TAFE. And these things not only provide relief for Australians who need it, but they also help to bring down inflation by cutting those prices.
Ross, the RBA says it's now getting closer to pausing the rate rises. You know, when you just spoke a moment ago, you said that the RBA board and the governor shouldn't go to water where there's some political heat. Are you saying that this might be what the RBA governor's doing now, that he might be getting cold feet, or do you think it's right that the RBA is now getting closer to pausing rate rises, even though we've still got pretty high inflation?
Look, I think the governor is determined to try and beat inflation in Australia, and he does certainly point out the risks of not doing so. But, you know, you've got to look at the actions as compared with other central banks around the world, where the US Federal Reserve says it might go back to 0.5% rate rises this month and keep going beyond that to try and crush the inflation. And there are slightly different circumstances. But in most measures, it looks as though Australia's about 6 months behind the United States. And after all, our inflation rate still today, as we sit here, is higher than the United States. And that's the reason why you can't go to water on this. You must go hard, even if it causes pain and unpopularity. And there's certainly plenty of that about the Reserve Bank governor right now.
Yeah. Now, look, we're almost out of time, but Andrew Charlton, I just wanted to very quickly get your response to a story in the Daily Telegraph today where a Labor candidate accused her party of sidelining people of colour so they could parachute you, who she called a white male millionaire, into Parramatta. What's your response to her comments?
Well, look, she made those comments in a private WhatsApp group. I think, you know, all of us have said things in private WhatsApp groups that we probably regret. She called me, she apologised. I fully accepted that apology. I think she's a great person. It takes a big person to apologise like that, and I think she'll be a fantastic representative.
There you go. That's very forgiving of you. All right, Ross Greenwood, Andrew Charlton, thanks for your time. Up next, we get an update on the preparations for the 2032 Olympic Games in